All right, what's up everyone? Welcome back to another video episode. This one is going to be some more about Rails, this time a little bit more fundamental. I saw this post a couple days ago from Zilton7000 about asking how folks learned active record associations. And yeah, they're kind of confusing and all the articles are great, but maybe they just get even more confusing. And then there's a bunch of comments about here's a couple different ways that I modeled it. I'm using the Odin project, or I'm using user and posts. These are really sort of like the basic ones, but I thought that it might be helpful to just create just a super short video and then like a little exercise or like a series of exercises that folks could try out. So I've created this repository called Starwars. So it's like supposed to be like star, but like AR is active record. I know, super dorky, whatever. But if you go down here, the idea is that I've created a little bit of a kata or some exercises that you can try out. So there are tests that are already built into this repository that you can run, and they'll fail if the associations are not correctly set up. So we're going to go through the process of setting up the associations between these different resources. So we have a film, a person film, a planet, and a species. Just a couple different models from a Star Wars, sort of like a Star Wars modeling. And the idea is that this should push us into learning a little bit about the most fundamental associations. We're not going to talk about single table inheritance, and we're not going to talk about polymorphic associations in this specific video, but we'll get into that in other future videos. This is really just meant to be sort of a simple phase one association kata. So I've downloaded and installed, actually here, let me refresh the README that I just updated. So here's how you can set it up. You can follow these instructions, and then here's how you run the tests. I'm using rspec. So if you run rspec while you're in the project repo, you'll see all the failing tests here. So we're using shoulda matchers, which is a really handy tool from Thoughtbot for asserting that certain associations exist. We're not going to look at too much into the actual tests, but we're going to just look at these test failures. So a film is expected to have many people through person films. So let's actually go through the README and go line by line in the README and talk about these associations. Let's also look at the code here. So if we go into app models, I've already created the models for you, and the database migrations are all set up. So we're not going to talk about how to do the migrations. We're just going to talk about the actual associations today. So if you look at a film, you'll see that the schema information is available at the top. You can also, if you don't have this annotation, so I'm using a gem called annotate, which allows me to add the columns to the top of a class file with a comment. But if you're not using this, then one thing you could do is go into the schema .rb file, and you can also see what the database schema looks like here. So I'm using Postgres, so when you download and run it, you'll see that. But here's the name of the table, and then here's all the columns that are in the table. So in the films column, we have a title, created at, updated at. Again, these create table calls are going to add for us the ID by default. We have a films people, and here's kind of what those look like. So let's go back and take a look at the README here. So the very first one we want to do is say that a film. So for a film, you should be able to list the people in a given film. Now, one way that I can test this a little bit easier is I'm going to pull up my film spec and have that sort of side by side my film model. So the film model is here on the left. This is the active record model, and then on the right I have my test that's sitting there. And with Vim, I'm using Vim test, I think, so I can just use leader H to run a specific test. So we can just narrow it down to that one test. So a film is expected to have many people through person films. Okay, so that means that in order for us to have to say a film has many people, right? This is going to say when I call film on an instance of film, if I call .people, I should get back a list of person objects for people who have starred in this film. Now, in order to get back the people that have starred in this film, I need to make a query, a database query that says, select all of the people, or select star from the person table where that person ID exists in some join table between film and people. And so we haven't actually set that up. In fact, let's actually go to person film first. So one of the ways that you can start out by like adding all of your associations is looking for where there is a column that that ends in _ID, and just try to think to yourself, like, is there a related model for this column that has an ID? And if so, we want to add a belongs to association. So anytime there's a column in the database that ends in _ID, oftentimes we'll refer to this as a foreign key to another table. So for the person films table, this is a join table between a person object and a film object. It has two columns, a person ID column and a film ID column. The person ID column will be the ID of a person in the person table. So here we can say belongs to person, and we can say belongs to film. Let's actually do this for all models that have foreign key relationships. So in this case, we have two. We have a species ID and a home planet ID. So the species ID, we're going to have a belongs to species, right? For the home planet, this is going to get a little interesting here. So we can say belongs to home planet. Now, when Active Record is setting up these associations, it's doing a lot of like conventional things. So when we started out in this person film model, right? And we say a person film belongs to a person, Rails knows that because the name of the association here is person, it can derive that the class name should also be person, that the foreign key is going to be person _ID. Okay, so it knows that just because we named this person, that it's going to like automatically look for a class called person, and it's going to use this person ID to associate to the ID in the people table. Now, Rails is automatically doing this logic for, or like this magic for us, converting between person and people. So the name of the table is always plural, right? Person films, people. And Rails has some like magic inside of active support. I think it's inflection maybe that does the conversion between like plural and singular, which is pretty cool. So when we're looking at person film, right, we're able to just say belongs to person and belongs to film, because film is also similarly, right? Film is also a class name. Okay, but when we get to home planet, things are going to get a little weird because we don't have a class called home planet, right? Like if we look in our models table, we have a class called planet, but we don't have a class called home planet. So when we're looking at the planet model and it has planets, right? The name of this association is home planet. So that's going to look for a class called home planet, but it doesn't exist. And so if we're creating a belongs to association where we have the foreign key in this table, that means we're creating the correct type of association to a home planet. But if the name of the association is different from the name of the class that we're associated to, then we need to pass another argument to belongs to that specifies which class we want to use. So we're going to say class name is planet, okay? And we put this in strings because, or like in quotes, because as Rails is loading up all of the different models, it's going to constantize this and look up the class based on the string name of the model. If we were to just pass the class directly like this, that would work as long as every single class was loaded in the correct order and there were no cyclical dependencies between the associated classes. Tons of stuff you don't really need to worry about. Just know that you have to pass class name is planet here. Okay, so this is going to give us a person belongs to a species and it belongs to a home planet that has the class name planet. Great. So let's keep going. So we've done film, person, we've done person film. Remember, we're just going back and looking at the columns that have ID. And so now we're to planet. And here we have something that ends in _ID, and that's for a senator. So we can say belongs to senator. Now, there is no class name called senator, right? So instead, we want the senator to be a person. So here, again, we can say class _name is person, okay? There's no other ID columns in the planet, so we're going to move on to species. So species doesn't have any _ID foreign keys that point to any other columns. So we're done with our first pass, which is like go through, add all of your belongs to associations. Let's just take a step back and run our spec. So rspec spec. And we should see some of the tests have passed here. Okay, so we've got 12 examples and 7 are failing. So we've got 5 tests that are passing. So that's move in the right direction. Okay, let's keep going. So the next thing we want to do is add our has many association. So person, film here. So one way that you can do this is like by looking everywhere that you have a belongs to. If you go to the other class, you will almost always have a has many or sometimes a has one that points back at this table. So, whoa, that was weird. Okay, so for when we're looking at person film, we see that it belongs to person and it belongs to film. So we can go to the person object, person, and now we can add a has many that points back at person films. So person films. And when we're using a has many, the name of the association is going to be plural, and that's how Rails will know to make it singular and then look up the class name. And the class name in this case should be person film. So if we wanted to rename this association to like people films or something like that, we could. Now it's important to note that when we're talking about this has many here that goes to this join table for person film, the person films table doesn't actually have anything about the films. It doesn't have anything about the people. It just has their IDs to join them together. A person film represents a specific person starring in a specific film. And so if like Luke Skywalker, he was in he was in like several films, right? So you would have entries in the person film table where it's like, okay, A New Hope, Luke Skywalker's ID. So A New Hope ID for the film ID, and then Luke Skywalker's ID for the person. And then you would see like the next episode 5 and then Luke Skywalker, episode 6, Luke Skywalker, episode 7, Luke Skywalker, etc., until you have like the correct data in the join table. But when we call person or if we have an instance of a person, right? We have a Luke here, which is person.find x, whatever. Like if we say Luke dot person films, that doesn't tell us anything about the films. So what we want to do is have luke.films return the list of films, like the movies that Luke Skywalker was in. So there's a couple different approaches to do this. One, we could just not have this model, and if we just had this table built exactly the same with the same columns, over here we could say like has and belongs to many, and then we could say films. But I recommend never actually using has and belongs to many. Don't ever use it. And the reason is, if you there's an alternative, and the alternative is better. We'll go over the differences here, but I wanted to just call out has and belongs to many. Its purpose is to create a many-to-many relationship between two different models, where you would not need to worry about this intermediate model class, but you almost never use that. Okay, so instead what we want to do is we want to have a has many through. So here we can say has many films through person films. Person films. And what we're doing here is we're saying like, we're going to create a new association called films. And this association is built through an existing association on the same model. So this through, what we're passing here for through, this symbol here must exist as an association on the model already. So we have to have person films already here defined as an association on the model so that we can call through and then say person films. Sometimes you might even want to like pass, the class name here. So if we wanted to name the has many like acted in films or something like that, then we would have to pass class name film, right? Because we're following the convention where we've named our association films, it knows again to singularize, constantize, look up the class name for the film, and then it knows how to do the query here. So when we call person.film, so Luke films, this will result in a query that's like select star from films, where, let's see, where person ID, wait, no, yeah, so select star from films, join person films on films.id is equal to person films dot film ID where person films dot person ID is equal to like this, the Luke's ID, right? So like that's kind of the SQL query that will be executed. In a future episode, I'd love to go through and just like kind of rebuild some of the basic associations for Active Record so that we can see how you might actually implement this stuff from scratch. But for now, we're just going to keep talking about these associations. So if we run rspec, well, let's go back and run our spec again. So person spec, and we'll keep going. Okay, so we've got 2 failures still. So a person is expected to have 1 senator through the home planet. Okay, we'll come back to that in a bit. Let's keep adding our has many associations. So in a film should have many person films. And again, we're going to do a has many people through person films. Okay, so has many people through person films. People is not a class name, but it is the plural of a class name, and Rails knows how to, again, singularize people and look up the class name for that. So this should work, I believe. So if we let's go to the film spec, and let's run this. I think we should be good to go for the film spec. Okay, we've got a test passing for film spec. So we're done with film. So film has the right associations now. We're able to look up all the people who have starred in a given film, and that's pretty cool and helpful. All right, so now let's go into person. Okay, so we've got belongs to species. So now we should be able to go to the species and say has many people. So here, this one's going to be a simple has many people, right? Because a person belongs directly to a species. So in this case, the species ID directly relates to the ID of a species. Species happens to be the same singular and plural of this instance of the class. So that should totally work and should return the species to us. Next, let's go to belongs to home planet. Okay, so we can go to our planet. Now, what's odd about this one, planet spec. Okay, so a planet should belong to a senator, so this test should pass. It does. And it should have many citizens. So this is another wrench that we've sort of thrown in here. So a person should have many citizens, and citizens are instances of people or instances of a person. So a planet, I mean, we could have just made it people, but that wouldn't be very interesting. And I wanted to show like sometimes how you need to use this one feature. So we're going to say a planet has many citizens, and now we can again specify class name is person, right? Now, this is interesting because when we look at a person, right? A person belongs to a home planet. Now, when we're calling planet.citizens here, we know that we want to use the class name person, so we can look at the correct table. However, when we look at the people table, we don't see planet ID. We still don't see planet ID, right? So if we were to attempt to query for the citizens of a given planet, it wouldn't know exactly which foreign key on the person is relating to the planet that the citizens belong to. So in this specific case, we need to tell the planet class which foreign key it needs to use when it's looking up the citizens of the planet, okay? So in this case, the foreign key is home planet ID. And so what we can do is, let's actually run the test to see how it fails. So planet spec. Right, so if we run this one, so it says planet is expected to have many citizens. So expected planet to have a has many association called citizens, and it does. Now it says a person does not have a planet ID foreign key. So it doesn't, you're right, because it has a home underscore planet ID foreign key. So in this case, what we need to do is go into this has many citizens association and add a third argument. And this third argument is foreign key. I always mix up the I and the E here. So foreign key, home planet ID. So we're going to explicitly tell this association which foreign key comes back to planet. So now if we go back to our spec, planet spec, and run the tests here, we have 2 passing tests. So we're looking good for planet. All right, let's keep going. Oh gosh, I jumped all the way out. So app models. Species, okay, that one should be good. Planet should be good. Person film should be good. Person should be almost good. Film should be good. Okay, so let's run our specs again. rspec to run all of the tests. Okay, so we've got only 2 failing tests, and they're both related to person. So let's go take a look at look at those. So we'll jump into person here. Okay, so a person. Senator. Okay, so a person should have a senator based on their home planet. So a person is from Naboo. That's their home planet. They should have a senator, and their senator should be whatever, Princess Amidala or whatever, Senator Amidala. So we can come over here and we can say like, this person should have 1 senator. And the way that they're going to have that senator is through their home planet. Right, so in this case, we're going to do a have 1. Now, a have 1, the difference between a belongs to and a have 1, or a has 1, has 1. The difference is that when we're doing belongs to, the foreign key is in this table. So the foreign key for species is in this table. The foreign key for a has 1 is going to be in the other table, coming back to us. So in this case, when we say has 1 senator, right? The foreign key in this case is actually in the home planet table, because a planet, again, let's look, planet. So a planet has a senator ID. So this senator ID is what actually relates back to the person through the home planet. So we can come back over here and say through home planet. Okay, so now a person should have a senator through the home planet. Okay, so let's jump back over here and run this test. And it works. Okay, so then there was one other here. Citizens. Okay, this is great. So a person should have many citizens through its home planet. This is like has many, I guess it's like has many neighbors or something, or has many citizens from the same planet or whatever, but we'll just call it citizens just so we can keep it easy. Through home planet. And now we should be able to run these tests. And they all pass. Now we can jump out and say rspec, and they all pass. So we are good to go. And so that's kind of like the whole rundown for the associations that I wanted to show. Another way that I've seen this done before is with Harry Potter. So you can have wizards. Wizards have wands. Wizards belong to houses. There's also like, you can have Quidditch matches that are between different houses, and you can have the headmaster, which is a maybe like a type of wizard. So there's using Star Wars or Harry Potter or whatever sort of world that you're coming from. One way to practice associations is to try to like make very idiomatic association names that actually mean something, rather than just naming them the conventional, post and comment and tweet and whatever. Those are really, really good patterns to follow when you're working with Rails, is trying to stick to conventions so you don't have to add class name, foreign key, et cetera, et cetera. However, sometimes it can be really nice to have idiomatic, nice associations that make sense and return the types that you expect. So hopefully this is useful. If it was, I would really appreciate a quick like. And yeah, I'm going to continue making content like this. So if you find it helpful and you want to subscribe and turn on those notifications, please do. Also, like, super spammy, right, to say this kind of stuff at the end. But it turns out that like people who have who ask for subscriptions end up having like twice as many subscribers. So it's like super interesting. But I really just want to like create content, help folks spin up and become web devs. So yeah, really, really appreciate all the positive comments so far, and yeah, appreciate your time and attention. So hopefully this is useful. If it is, let me know in the comments. If you have other worlds that you're thinking of that might be interesting to experiment with, drop those in the comments. Totally open to PRs if you wanted to add some more features or some more suggestions in the specs here on this repository. So go out and associate different models, and we'll see you next time.